Good evening. Welcome to tonight's shiur, last shiur of our series for Tov Shin Pei Hey. Today's shiur is dedicated in memory of Rabbi Joseph Chaim Teller, whose yahrzeit is on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, dedicated by his families Teller and Rabin. So thank you for that. And so let's go into our shiur. So first thing we have is, well, in many of the various guides, it's also in the Luach Chabad, mentions about if you're saying Selichos on your own, so then you should miss out the paragraphs in Aramaic. I just want to mention about the Luach Chabad is actually this year is 100th year since it's been published. It's come out in a special hardcover to celebrate that. So Reb Chaim Noah, he's talking about 1926. He was upset that they're giving out, the Kel Chabad are giving out a luach for shuls of a different nusach, and he offered to do this, and he for many years he published it. When he passed away, his son Reb Baruch Noah continued, and the Rebbe often would refer to the luach Kel Chabad. Anyway, so it mentions the minhag of, if you're saying Selichos on your own, not to say the pieces in Aramaic, and that's because of, it says in the Gemara that a person shouldn't plead for his needs in Aramaic because the Malachim are not very kindly to, they don't treat Aramaic requests kindly. Fine. So this fellow asks me, in Shul, he asks me, well, what about in leTziyon? We've got the three psukim of Kodesh and Baruch and Hashem Achusei Koyim La'olam Olam Yamaya. So should he also miss out those psukim in leTziyon, which are in Aramaic? Very good question. So I might have once discussed this before, but it's also discussed in the Siddur that the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur by Yom Kippur. So you've got Yom Kippur in Aramaic, and you've got two Yom Kippur. One is a prayer for Rabbonim V'Talmidei Dayan, and the other one is the Kol HaKadisha Hadayin. One is for the community, one's for the Rabbonim. So the second one, which is a prayer for the community, it says that a person who's davening on their own should miss out that one, whether it has Yochad HaMispal B'Beis, whatever the wording is, but it shouldn't say that Yom Kippur, which is therefore it's implicit that the first one you do say, despite it being in Aramaic. So how does that jive with not saying Machi Mase because it's in Aramaic? Yeah, so it seems to be clear in the Siddur that you do say the first Yom Kippur. Actually, the Mishnah Berurah, I think I did discuss this about a month ago. The Mishnah Berurah actually says to miss out the whole lot, but that's not Aramaic. Yeah, and just I gave over this point in the shiur in the Talmidim. And someone pointed out, what about Kagavno? Now, Kagavno is in Aramaic, and there's a whole piece that if you're davening on your own, you add a whole new paragraph of Alema Baruch, and that's also in Aramaic. It's all a piece of Zohar. So we don't seem to be so have a difficulty with stuff in Aramaic. So how does that? Let's sort this out. So what you have on the screen is from, I think it's in Resh Pei Hey or Resh Pei Dalet in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, talking about Yom Kippur. And it says the following. This is a ha'ora from someone from California. He sent me the following observation. It says, we say Yom Kippur, which is asking for for redemption, and they ask the question: on Shabbos we shouldn't be mevakesh, we shouldn't be doing supplications tchinas on Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe writes here, which is from earlier, she'ein zoi tchino ela bracha. It's not a supplication, it's a blessing. Now, what exactly are the semantics, the difference between a supplication and a blessing? But be that as it may, he does say that this is a bracha, not a techina. So this fellow from California wants to suggest on the same distinction that Yom Kippur is not a tchina, but it's a bracha. That's why it's okay to say it on Shabbos. That's also why it's not a problem to say it in Aramaic, biyochid, because the lashon is al yevakesh odom tzrochov. The lashon Arami is lashon of supplication, shouldn't be in Aramaic. That's where you need the malachim to help out, and they won't help you very well with the Aramaic. But if it's a bracha, that's not a problem. Now coming back, therefore, the same thing with kegavno. What is it? You're quoting a piece of Zohar. Actually, the piece of Zohar is explaining the deeper meaning of Baruch Hu, and Baruch Hu es Hashem and Baruch. That's the last piece, which we only said biyochid. So it's a piece of Torah from the Zohar. So it's not a problem to say it in Aramaic. Therefore, by coming back also for a leTziyon, that it's kedusha. You're saying Kodesh, Kodesh, and then you translate it in Aramaic, and so on. But that's not a bakosha. It's not a supplication. It's not a prayer. It is a praise. Kedusha is a praise, and therefore it's not a problem to say those psukim in Aramaic. In the Machio Mase, which is the back of which is towards the end of Selichos, that is a tefillah, asking for healing, etc. And that's why we don't say it if you're saying Selichos on your own. I'm going to address something which is not on my list of questions, but I've been asked this several times. And what is it? How do you handle if you are davening with a minyan, Selichos, and they're a little bit ahead of you? How do you deal with the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim? Yeah, how do you deal with the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim whilst the minyan is ahead of you? And my advice was that actually Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim have to be said with the minyan, and the other way around. When a minyan says Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, you have to say it with them. Actually, someone sent me this week. He says he davens in a non-Chabad minyan, and they have more times Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim than we do. So I didn't check that out. We have 4 times. First, 1 time Kel Apayim, and then 3 times Kel Melch Yoshev. We have 4 times in the regular Selichos, but they have more. So he says, should I say it with them or not? Chabad. So I said, sure, you have to say it. And the other way around, if a Ashkenaz fellow who doesn't say Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim in a regular mincha or shachris, if he happens to be in a Sfard shul and they're saying, or in a Chabad shul, and they're saying Hashem Hashem, he has to say with them. When a minyan is saying Hashem Hashem, you have to say it with them. So now I'm saying Selichos. So when the minyan says Hashem Hashem, I have to say it with them. When I'm catching up on my own, I have an issue with that. So very simple. And this I did this morning. I'm saying my Selichos, and they're ahead of me. So I put my finger at the place where I stop, pause, join the Sibur, and say Keler Chapayim or Kel Melch Yoshev, say Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim. Then when I finish, I go back to where my finger is, and so on. So I'll say Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim with the minyan, and when I come to that place later, I've done it already. Don't have to say it a second time. Kaven de Osa Liodon. Also, this is in the Siddur. It's discussed in more detail. What happens when you're davening biyochid? Is it okay to say Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim with a niggin, or should you not say it at all? And that's a confusion in the Siddur. It says that if you mispal biyochid ein omer zeh, and there's a letter of the Rebbe where he says it's a din poshet in Shulchan Aruch, and he gives a reference to Sim Sof Kuf Samach Vav, and there it says in Mechaber you can say it with kekorעת b'Torah. So that's despite what's been published that we don't say it biyochid. Yours truly is of the opinion that the way I understand from the Rebbe's letter, that the way it's written in Shulchan Aruch, that you can say it biyochid provided it's kekorעת b'Torah. Let's move on. Now, I know I've shared this a few years ago, but I suspect some of us may not remember exactly, and that is Oshamnu. Oshamnu is in the sequence of Alef-Beis, but curiously it's divided into 4 sentences, which become very significant on Yom Kippur, because we sing it all together. I believe that's a universal niggin for Oshamnu. And it's clearly divided into 4 sentences. I know in the newest version of the Selichos, one of the new print, they've taken away the colons in those places, but this is the way it is traditionally. So here's a fascinating biur al derech haremes in a sefer called Avos Torah, and he says the following: that this is a remes to Yehuda, because you've got the first sentence has got 4 units, the second sentence has got 5 units, the third sentence has got 10 units, from your Asnra through to Kshino Erev has got 10 units, and the last sentence has got 5 units. So you got there a Yud and a Hey and a Daled and a Hey. So you have there a remes to Yehuda. But of course you're going to ask what happened with the Vov. So he suggests 2 suggestions. One is that for Ava Anachnu Hashanu, or he says another fascinating thing, that if you look carefully in this Oshamnu, which is meant to be only 22 words, the Chayra, because it's 22 letters in the Alef-Beis, but they're actually 28 words, because Dibarna Doifi is 2 words, Tafal Noshek has 2 words, Yasnu Roy is 2 words, and Kishino Erif is 2 words. So that's 4 extra words to the Alef-Beis. Then Tov has 3 innings, and so therefore in all you got 6 extra words. So that the 6 extra words in Oshamnu is the Vov, the remes to the Vov of Yehuda. So it's al derech haremes, but I haven't seen anything better. I'm sure there is something al derech hapshat, but that's what actually one of the boys suggested, that because it has double words by dibarna doifi and tifalna sheker and keshino oirev, it's double words. That's why you pause there. I'm not sure what's the logic in that, but fine. Also, by the way, you also have your atzmiro. It's also a double word, but fine. So that's that. Just one more point whilst we're at it. In the Siddur, I've quoted that the first print of Chabad, of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, the word T-Avnu is spelled actually with a komatz, To-Avnu, rather than T-Avnu. The exact difference in translation, I'm not sure. We're going to go on to another timely Inyan. So someone asks me, he sees in the Chabad Selichos. We discussed the Selichos recently, about 2-3 weeks ago, possibly, and how the Rebbe sought to print it in Tov Shin Tes Vov, and okay. So now there is a word here, phrasexchoחה, spelt with 2 cheses, and that word does not exist in Hebrew, has no meaning. So what's going on here? This poem starts off Ein kemidas bosor midosecho, and it's talking about the contrast of how things were good for Eden, and then they are brought down. So what we have here is, it's like a bit of a rhyme: hipuch, shipuch, hapuch, bapuch. That's the rhyme here. It's also in alphabetical order. So you got Zayin, Ches, Tes. So meanwhile, we have this second phrase, or the second part of this sentence, Chibas Rea, the love, the cherishment of the beloved, Kekeren Hapuch. Now, Keren Hapuch is in the English translation, Chabad Selichos, translated like the shine of an emerald. And you can see here it comes from the Pasuk in Iyov at the bottom of the screen on the right, where Iyov, towards the end of his life, after all his suffering, then he is blessed with 3 daughters, and he called them, one Yemima, bright as the day, one is Ketzio, like you have spices, Moiro Ketzio. The third one, the Shem Hashlish, is Keren Hapuch, like the shine, like the beam of the emerald. That's the Targum has Ismoragdin. Ismoragdin is the Aramaic for emerald. And also, I saw somewhere, I didn't check this up, in the Choshen, Neufech Sapir V'Yohalem. So the Neufech is emerald. So Puch and Neufech is the same thing. Okay. Meanwhile, so let's go back to this phrase again. Chibas Rea, the one who was beloved by the Ebershter, who is Rea, who was like a friend. Kekeren Hapuch, it was like the shine of the emerald. Now is hashchucha ועזובה, is now neglected, כקורעת בפוך. Now the puch here means like a kind of mascara, a kind of cosmetic, and that's again, it's a posuk. It's a posuk in Yirmiyah. You can see again the bottom of the screen to the left. And here is saying about using a moshel, that you are so lowly, so unappealing, that even if you'll put on adizah, even if you'll put on golden jewelry, even if you will put mascara on your eyes, it's in vain, because those who would be attracted are actually have despised you. That's the posuk in Yirmiyah. So that's the lashon. So before was the chibas rea with the shine like the emerald, and now neglected kekokras bapuch. But what's this hashchucha? So now in the newer edition, which I have online in the on the Otzar Chochma, from Tafshin Pei Aleph, they changed it from hashchucha to chashuva. All right. So how would you translate that? Chashuva means eminent, important. Va'azuva means neglected. How does that sentence read? So again, I think they didn't get it right, and I'm going to tell you that there's a new edition which I just saw yesterday morning. There's a Chabad Selichos Hamafeirish. There's a Mendel Tvardovich who's done a Siddur Hamafeirish, and he's done a Selichos. It's actually printed a few years ago, and there he reads Hashchucha va'azuva, and we're going to explain this. Now, what you have on the screen is here's from the Selichos of the Goldschmidt edition, which I mentioned a few weeks ago. So he has Chashuva Azuva Kekokras Bapuch. And this is also in an earlier print. You can see it's Amsterdam Tov Tzadik Tes. Chashuva Azuva Kekokras. The word Chashuva means considered. It's considered neglected. Like this woman who's trying to put on the mascara to make herself more attractive, but considered, the word chashuva means is considered neglected. But then we have here another edition of the Selichos, published in Vilna, and it's meant to be, according to the nusach of Rossiya Hatzvonis Marovis, northwest Russia, which is exactly where Aslot come from. Yeah, so there it has chashucha va'azuva kekokras bapuch. So now, when we see in the first print, about print, when it has chashucha, I think the mistake is only one mistake, that it was a ches instead of a chof. Chashucha means dark and neglected. So the contrast is, you've said here, the one who was beloved to the reya, to the friend, and had the beam like the emerald, chashucha is now dark, va'azuva, and neglected, kekokras bapuch, like the woman described there in Yirmiyah. So chashucha va'azuva works. Chashuva azuva works. Chashuva va'azuva does not work. That vov, if you use the girsa of chashuva, then chashuva means considered, chashuva azuva considered neglected. If you have the word chashucha, you can say it's dark, she's dark and neglected, then the vov fits there. But chashuva, important and neglected, just doesn't read properly. So, and as I say, in the later edition, Tvardovich with the Mefurish, they've actually gone to this nusach of chashucha va'azuva. Right. I know at the speed I was going this morning, I wouldn't notice this kind of thing, but someone pointed it out to me. Right. Now, the fourth thing on our list for today is when the Chazan takes out the Sefer Torah. So then he turns around and he says, Gdlou Hashem iti on the Roma Moshmo Yachta. We're not going to the detail which part he's facing the Aron Kodesh, which parts face the Kehillah, but at that point he's poised to bring the Sefer Torah towards the Bima. And the response of the congregation is L'cho Hashem HaGdula. So here was the question. Does the Chazan also say L'cho Hashem HaGdula? The practicality is like this, that someone went into one of the publishers of the Siddur, and he says, I'd like to publish a card. So because not all Chazonim know L'cho Hashem HaGdula by heart. So if they could have a laminated card to hold in front of them, and as they're making their way from the Aron Kodesh to the Bima, they will be able to read L'cho Hashem HaGdula as they're going. So the publisher says, who says that the Chazan has to say it at all? It's meant to be said by the Kohen. Who says the Chazan has to say it? So this is the question was put to me. Does the Chazan say L'cho Hashem HaGdula? Now, one of a few responses is that in some synagogues, shuls, now that is said by the congregation, but I believe the lead is the Chazan, who leads everyone in the song. I might be wrong, but I would imagine that L'cho Hashem HaGdula, it's sung by the congregation, but the Chazan takes the lead. So that's the minhag of the shuls which sing it. The other, then two other points. Number one, by Bochus Hashem HaMevayrach, the Chazan says, "Bless ye Hashem who is blessed," and the tzibur answer, "Baruch Hashem HaMevayrach Le'olam V'ed." The Chazan also has to. There's a discussion whether the Chazan says it together with them or says it after them. Does the tzibur answer Amen or not? That's another discussion. But there's no question that if you are standing there and telling everyone what to do, you're telling them Bochus Hashem HaMevayrach, well, you better do the same yourself. And you should also bless, not just tell them what to do, you should also bless them. So therefore the Chazan has to say Baruch Hashem HaMevayrach Le'olam V'ed, as he's told everyone else to do. So now he's saying, Gdlu Hashem iti. Applaud Hashem along with me. And we will exalt his name together. Yeah, and then he's going to fall silent. It just doesn't fit. It's even more, more than by Baruch Hashem HaMevayrach. He's saying iti. He's saying yacht and unreim shema yadov. So how can it be that the Chazan shouldn't say it? I looked around. I couldn't find this mefurish, but it's l'chei adova poshet. Then. But we have the dilemma. What about the Chazan? He can't say Baal Peh. Well, it's one of the things that you should know Baal Peh. And here you have on the screen, we know the Rebbe is very particular to say everything from a Siddur, almost, but there are just a few exceptions. And of those exceptions, you can see that Vayhi ben Soya and Brich Shmei, he said from the Siddur. I've quoted the wrong thing. But the next paragraph, this is of the Maaseh Melech, the Rebbe's Hanhogas, that the Rebbe would say, this is one of the few things the Rebbe would say, Baal Peh was the piece of L'cho Hashem HaGdula. He would say, the Rebbe would look very intently at the Sefer Torah has been taken from the Aron until the Bima, and he would say L'cho Hashem HaGdula and Ala Koil, etc. He'd say Baal Peh. So, yeah. So what does the Chazan? The Chazan should memorize this Baal Peh. He got lots of practice when someone else is a Chazan. And if not, you know what? If you don't know Baal Peh, so when you get to the Bima, you put down the Sefer Torah, go back to your place, take the Siddur, and say it a minute later, till the Gab is finished making all the the other preparations and calling up. You have another minute. You can say it on your own a minute later. It doesn't have to be dafka whilst you're walking around with it. Right, so that's as much as I have to say about it. Perhaps I'll add one more thing. Why is there no Mishnayos on tefillin? Why is there no Mishnayos on tzitzis? And the Rambam says something to the effect that the things which are so well known, you don't have to have a Mishnayos for that. You don't. It's because it's practice every day. People know it. It wasn't necessary to have. Of course, there is a Maseches Ktanas. You have Maseches Tefillin, etc. But it wasn't necessary. Things which are so well known, they don't have to be documented. So this might be one of those. Right, but it's so poshet. Right, let's move on to question number 5, may one teach a non-Jew to read Hebrew? Now, this is a question which I've tried to find explanation earlier, and someone asked me this past week. So I looked up and I found that there is a Sefer, you can see on the notes, a Sefer published in a Sefer called Matanos Ba'odom, published in the year Reish Tzadik Hey. So this is possibly in Italy, about just under 500 years ago. So he says it is okay, and he goes I read it through. He talks about teaching Torah to goyim, and then he remains that the language you are allowed to read. You're allowed to teach a goy the Hebrew language to read. You are allowed to. Now, this is quoted in Encyclopedia Talmudis, and there is some reference. He says, the Encyclopedia Talmudis, for those who don't know, has now got about 51 volumes, and I think they're up to the letter Mem. And when it comes to this entry about teaching Torah and Lashon Kodesh to Goyim, he says, Ayin Erech Torah. So check up the entry on Torah, then you'll be able to see about whether you're allowed to teach the other opinions, whether you're allowed to teach a Goy to read Hebrew, etc. So it's going to be a long time till that volume will come out. So meanwhile, what I have is this Sefer, as I said, Sefer Matanos Ba'odom, written by some Rabbi Yochanan Tzroa from 500 years ago, who says it is okay. So Yesham al Yismoich. The question was here, a shliach was invited by a professor in a university where he's on Selichos to come and give a course in Hebrew. And this would be for the shliach a very valuable foothold into the university, more legitimate as to be there. And he's worried that there may be goyim who will sign up for the course. So is that okay or not? So that's the answer. Yes, it is okay to teach them, especially that nowadays it's so easy for someone. It's not as if you are enabling them, which they couldn't do otherwise. It's so easy to pick up some kind of course somewhere online, etc. So it's not as if you're giving them something which they couldn't get otherwise. I see someone put a question here on the chat. I don't see. Right. Let's move on. Right. So here comes again a timely question. If the 10th man turns up late for Selichos, do we say Kaddish at the end? So I'm going to share with you. I'm going to tell you what happened. Someone asked me this, and before I looked it up, I said, if you still have, one of the Gimel Midas Rachmim, as I said, we say it 4 times. If one of them still have yet to be said, and you have your 10th man, okay. But I felt if that's not there, if it's later, if it turns up later, so then I felt it wouldn't be justified. But we're going to read the Mati Ephraim. So the Mati Ephraim is in Simtov Kuf Pei Aleph, and he says, do not start Ashrei until you got 10 people, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to say Kaddish. But if it's not practical to wait, so then you'll say Ashrei without a Kaddish. And then you continue to say Selichos. Then if a 10th man comes just after you finish Ashrei, so then he says, say some psukim and say Kaddish. Now, this is a little bit of a tangent. And that is, this can happen any afternoon, that you're 9 guys in shul, 9 men, and you said Ashrei, and then the 10th one arrives. Can you say Kaddish when you didn't have 10 people present at Ashrei? And this is machlokes of the Taz and Magen Avraham, and one says you can say, one says you can't, and he's taken the view that you cannot. So if you've finished Ashrei and then 10th man arrives, well, say some psukim, because Kaddish is said after a communal prayer, etc. So you say a few psukim, then you can say Kaddish. All right, that's if he comes right after Ashrei. If he comes well after you started Selichos. But look at this, what he says. If the Chazan has not left the omit, that means almost towards the end. then you should say a few Selichos or Tachanunim, and that will allow you to say Kaddish Tiskabel, which I find very, very surprising, because Kaddish Tiskabel is said after Shmoina Esra. Tiskabel Tzloisun, except their prayers. Why do we say, so for example, after Megillah, we don't say Tiskabel Tzloisun, because it's not a tefillah, and so on. And that's why after Tehillim we say Kaddish Shalom, but no doubt Tiskabel. We don't say just Kaddish, what we call Kaddish Yosem, but Tiskabel Tzloisun is after Nes. Why is Tiskabel said after Slichos? Well, that's because Slichos has got a structure similar to the davening. As the Rebbe brings this from earlier poskim. It has an ashrei, then it has other psukim which correspond, like ashrei, like you have the entry for mincha. Then you have a bit of like a psukim de zimra, all these psukim which we have a collection of psukim. Then you got Yud Rachmim and some Selichos, which they are the equivalent of Shemon Esrei. And then you've got the ending, etc. Okay, so the Selichos is kind of trying to replicate the Seder of Tefillah. And therefore, we say Kaddish Tiskabel Slis. But what's bothering me here is, if you just say a couple of Slichos, does that qualify? Therefore, what you've said now qualifies as a tefillah, which warrants saying Kaddish Tiskabel. That's what I'm questioning. But if it does come earlier on, where you are saying Gid Gimel Serachmim or a significant amount of Piyutim, perhaps, I don't know, well then you could even say the Kaddish, the Chatzi Kaddish there, when the 10th man comes in, and then at the end you'd say Kaddish Tiskabel. So it's not such a clear story. Right, let's move on, and that is that someone tells me that here's a Gabe in a shul, and lots of guests there, and they sell Atahareso. And then, how do you remember who bought or how much, etc.? So they have a system. They've got a bag or a box with lots of numbers, and they tell the fellow, tell me what's your telephone number? 0, okay. And then a 7, and then a 9, and they take the numbers from all these little papers, and they put them in sequence. So they put 11, let's say 11 digits, one behind the other, and they put a paper clip. And then after Yom Tov, they take this paper clip and they call up, yeah, who's this? Yeah, okay. And then that's how they check out and how they are able to trace the various donors and to chase up the pledges. So he's asking the question, is this okay? Is it not a problem of mechin mi kodesh on doing, kind of collecting money or doing stuff to collect money? You're doing it on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. So here you have on the screen from Piskei Teshuvos and Siman Shin Chof Gimel, and is addressing the words of Mr. Brewer over there. It talks about that the Gaboy Tzedakah, that they would be allowed to have notes for each person's name to remember, and because the Havi Cheftze Shomayim, this is the simple heter, it's Cheftze Shomayim. So, as you say in Zmiris, don't look for it in Lubavitch Hasidah, Chafotzecha Asurim, something about, then it goes Lashadech Habonos or something. So, Chafotze Cheftze, Mimtzoi Cheftzecha, the Pasuk in Yeshaya, Mimtzoi Cheftzecha, do not seek your desires, your needs. So on Shabbos, Chafotzecha Asurim, but Cheftze Shomayim Mutorim. If you are pursuing the needs of tzedakah, etc., there's heavenly needs, so to speak, there you are allowed to. And that's what Gaboyim do. They have, let's say, a card system with the regulars, and they have paper clips or whatever with numbers, and that's how they keep track. And that's he's saying that it is okay. And then he says if there is amounts, he says that's also okay. So we're not so happy about that. And that's why he says how it's minig lahokel to use on Shabbos catalog cards with the names of mispalalim, and he uses a paper clip which indicates how much the donation was, the pledge was. Right. Someone's asking, is boirer, is collecting those papers boirer? So boirer is when you got psoilus and oichel, and you're taking the bad away from the good. Here, you're selecting the numbers which you want, and you're going to create now, you're going to use them. So it's oichel. You want to ask, it's oichel and psoilus? I don't, all right, good question. Right. Yeah, I have to think about it. Okay, let's move on. Now we've got a bit shorter than usual, but so on. Right. So if you remember last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, talking about taking challah from cake, and how I mentioned number one, that tzemach tzedek is malamed zchus on those who don't take challah from cakes. Even when it doesn't, we use the quantity of flour to warrant a shiur challah, and he says possibly that in hilchos challah, the fact that it is so sweet would take away. You'll say the main thing is the sweetener, the honey. Therefore, it should be potter from challah. You give such a svara, but it is recommended to take challah from cake also. So this is what we have over here. So this shlucha sent me a picture after she actually thanked me for the shiur. She listened online afterwards, and so very nice. So she's, as you can see, she's made lots of small honey cakes. Each one was it about half a liter or something, and all these tins, and then she's covered them and to take challah. So I want to go through this concept of covering in order to take challah. And before I get carried away, what I told her is that instead of having several cloths, it would have to be one long cloth, a large cloth to cover the whole lot, to be able to take challah. So let's now take a look where we're coming from. So you've got here in your day a siman shin chof hey hichas challah. If you have two batches of dough, each one is less than the shiur, whatever it is, 43 eggs. If each one is 30 eggs, so each one you've got two batches of dough. If the two batches of dough are touching one another and a bit stuck to one another, then they combine, and then you can take and should take challah from the combined amount, which let's say in this example would be the equivalent of 60 eggs. If they're not stuck together, but they are in one basket, so then we have the basket combines them, and that is even after they're baked and after they're made into bread, you can put them in the basket, and that's indeed what's done, by the way, by the matzah baking. In the matzah baking, haste is very important to avoid chimutz, and so typically the matzahs are made with each batch is a smaller shiur than shiur challah, and then afterwards, after the matzahs are baked, and they are now after the oven, then they will combine or cover them and take challah from a whole batch of matzahs. It can be several times in a day, but that's the seder of taking challah after the baking, using the concept of siruf sal. Then the Mechaber adds another line. Yesh mi she'omer. There are those who say that if you cover the bread with a cloth, that is the equivalent of them being combined in a basket. So again, the Shulchan Aruch had said the concept of siruf sal, when you've got multiple loaves, and they are all in one basket. So then we have this idea that the one basket makes them all into one unit. I'm sure you can find various parallels to this in Halocho, where the keli is mitzaref, everything shebetoich, everything which is within it, to become a single unit. But here's the chiddush of this later opinion, which says, never mind a basket. Even if you cover them with you cover them with a cloth, it combines them into a single unit. Now, I have a specialist sefer on challah called Chelkas Ben Yomin. He brings one opinion which says it means that you have the cloth underneath and it's wrapped over. But that's not the generally followed opinion. He says Aruch HaShulchan, and that takes the view that it means you cover them with a cloth. So you're going to take, just like you have the idea that the basket combines all its contents to become a single unit. So again, each unit is less than the shiur challah. By combining them, it now acquires a chiyuv of challah, and you mafresh challah then. And so the same thing he says if you cover it with a cloth. So therefore, I wrote back to her that in future, we said this taking challah from cake. We said tzemach tzedek's b'challah is melit, is mamlitz, that hayishem lamed schus, that there's yeshal malismech, you don't have to. But even if you do, if you want to be machmir, fine. So then you should cover it all with one cloth, rather than just, as you can see, separate pieces of cloth. So that's the benefits of having WhatsApp pictures to be able to see exactly what's going on. You give a psak halocha, then someone sends you a picture. You know whether they did it right or need to be take it further. Right, that's as much you have on your list. I want to address one more point, and that is, which is added to my list after I sent out the list this afternoon, on Erev Yom Kippur. So the women light candles at home and they say Shechianu. The men don't light candles. When do they say Shechianu? So here actually there's a Gemara in Erevin. Gemara Erevin asks, why don't we make Kiddush? Why don't we make Kiddush on Yom Kippur? What's this idea of making Kiddush on Yom Kippur? Well, like people on Makabel Shabbos early, perhaps we can be Makabel Yom Kippur a little bit early and make Kiddush. So my answers, if you say the bracha, Shechianu, B'zman hazeh, so then you can't drink the wine. Once you've said Shechianu, B'giyonu, B'zman hazeh, so you've kind of confirmed that you're already now, it's now Yom Kippur. Like in Makabel Shabbos. So by saying Shechianu, you Makabel Yom Kippur. So when do the men say Shechianu? After Kol Nidre. And since we're talking about this, many times people have asked this question: could they light the candles for Yom Kippur al Tanai, and this way they can get into a car and go to shul, and then they'll walk back, but they save them one trip, one journey on foot. So this should be a man, it can be a woman, yeah. Normally she benches licht at home, and she's asking, could her husband take her to shul by car? So the answer is that yes. Two things. Number one, do not say Shechianu, because once you say Shechianu, you're being Makabel Yom Kippur, so you wouldn't be able to get in the car. Pashtus, yeah. The other thing is that the Alter Rebbe says that if you light candles, al Tanai, but still you have to be Makabel Kedushas Hayom within 10 minutes. So someone has to be Makabel. So these are two conditions. Someone who wants to, a woman wants to light candles for Yom Kippur and then get in al Tanai and then get into the car. So no Shechianu until later, and you have a maximum of about 10 minutes to get to shul. If that doesn't work, call up your local Orthodox rabbi. He might find some heter for you. But now let's come back to our question. So in some of these machzorim, etc., it says the following instruction, that if a man lights candles for Yom Kippur, he shouldn't say Shechianu when he lights the candles, but he should say Shechianu in shul after Kol Nidre. So this gentleman, this Talmud Chochem, is questioning, why so? Meile v'son Yom Tov. There, for sure, the Ikar time for saying Shechianu is at Kiddush rather than lighting candles. Proof to that is we've got, you ever heard this Yaknahaz thing? So that means that's in the Gemara. So Yaknahaz means that Zman is said together with Kiddush. So the primary slot for Shechianu is at Kiddush. Women who normally don't make Kiddush themselves, so they say Shechianu when they're lighting the candles. That's their special time. Fine. But he's saying that's okay. So a man, a Yom Tov, doesn't say Shechianu when he lights candles because he's going to say it at Kiddush because that's the prime time. But on Yom Kippur he's not going to make Kiddush, as we said before, yeah, for practical reasons. We're not making getting Kiddush Yom Kippur. So why should he wait for Shechionu till after Kol Nidre? Why didn't he say Shechionu when he lights the candles? That was his question, which is a good question. And my answer to that was that generally men are used to that the idea that when you light candles, by default you're Makabel Shabbos or Makabel Yom Tov. That's more in the Ezras Noshim. By women, by men, it's not a given. And especially, after you light candles, you need to get to shul. You want to carry stuff, and especially Yom Kippur, you want to carry your machzor, you want to carry your shoes, your plimsolls, whatever it may be. You still may want to do something after you light candles. If you live near the shul, light candles and then go to shul. Walk to shul, carry your stuff, whatever. So it may be actually a good idea that a man shouldn't say Shechianu when he lights candles for Yom Kippur at home, because then he'll be limited. He won't be able to do any melacha. And since he's used to doing melacha every Friday, he lights candles and then he carries something to shul, carries his keys, whatever it may be. So, but Yom Kippur, if he says Shechianu Lizman Hazeh, he wouldn't be allowed to. So it may be better advice, Taka, the way it's written in those machzorim, whatever, that a man should leave Shechianu to say it along with everyone at the end of Kol Nidre before Ma'ariv itself begins. That's the end of my list for today, and I'm going to wish you all a ksiva tova. Next slot, Thursday. Is that Tanya? That's going to be, wait a minute. That's going to be Shem Gedalia. Is that right? So I have no excuse for that. So Bez Hashem, we should be able to have. It's going to be the only thing is I have less days to do my research, so it might be a shorter shiur. Okay, fine. That's the following Thursday is going to be Yom Kippur, and no shiur then. The Thursday after that is going to be Chol Hamoed Sukkos, and Bez Hashem will have something to share. And then after that, after Shabbos Bereishis, I'd like to go back to Motzei Shabbos, which we have a much better turnout, participation. I know it's to the detriment of those who are across the pond, can't join in, but do what we can. And so Motzei Shabbos Bereishis is 10 to 7. So I think 8:30 would be enough time to be able to start the shiur then. So that's my planning ahead. But meanwhile, wish you all a ksiva tova. Thank you so much for joining us. And we should meet in good health. And the ikher should be zoicha to ashnas geula. Mashiach tzidkenu b'mheira v'yameinu mamash.
Amen. Ksiva tova.
Ksiva tova.